She had been missing for 6 days. 6 days since the Mafia Boss's little girl vanished from her school gate. 6 days of helicopters over the city, of armed men kicking down doors, of every cop, every criminal, every informant terrified of giving the wrong answer. Because everyone knew there was nothing in this world Marco Venturi wouldn't burn to get his daughter back. By the 7th night, he wasn't sleeping. He wasn't eating. He was just walking, street by street, photo in hand, asking anyone who dared meet his eyes, "Have you seen my daughter?" Most people ran from him, except one boy, a small, quiet kid standing alone at the edge of a dark alley, a backpack slung over one shoulder, watching the mafia boss like he'd been waiting for him. Marco almost walked past him, until the boy stepped into his path. "Sir," he said, voice steady despite the shaking in his hands. "That girl you're looking for," he pointed to the photo. "She lives in my house." The boss froze. "What did you just say?" The boy swallowed hard. "She showed up 2 nights ago. She was crying." He hesitated, and she kept saying someone was coming for her. Marco's chest tightened. "Where is she now?" The boy looked down. "She hid under my bed last night, but before school this morning." He lifted his chin, eyes trembling. "She asked me not to tell anyone. Not even you." "Why?" Marco demanded. And that's when the boy finally whispered the truth. A truth so shocking the mafia boss felt the world tilt beneath him. "Because she says the man looking for her is not her real father." Marco's breath stopped. His daughter said that. Or someone made her believe it. And suddenly, the boss realized someone wasn't hiding the girl from him. Someone had rewritten her memories. Stay with me until the end, because what the boy reveals next will shatter everything the mafia boss believes about his own family. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's get started. The alley seemed to close in around them. Marco stared at the kid, his mind racing through possibilities that made his stomach turn. Someone had gotten to his daughter. Someone had poisoned her against him. But who? And why? The boy shifted nervously, clutching his backpack tighter. "My name is Danny," he said quietly. "I live 3 blocks from here with my grandmother. She doesn't know about the girl." Marco knelt down, bringing himself to eye level with the child. His voice came out rougher than he intended. "What exactly did she tell you?" Danny's eyes darted around the empty street before settling back on Marco's face. "She said her name was Sophia, but that wasn't always her name. She said someone took her from a place with white walls and nurses when she was little." The mafia boss felt ice forming in his veins. White walls and nurses, a hospital. But that was impossible. He'd raised Sophia since she was 3 years old, after her mother died. He remembered every birthday, every scraped knee, every bedtime story. What else? Marco's voice was barely a whisper now. "She talks about dreams," Danny continued, his young voice carrying the weight of secrets too heavy for his age. "Dreams about a woman with dark hair who used to sing to her in another language. She said the woman called her by a different name." Marco's hands trembled as he gripped the boy's shoulders. "What name?" "Isabella," Danny replied. "She said the woman called her Isabella." The world seemed to stop spinning. Marco had heard that name before, whispered in the shadows of his own organization. Isabella Rossetti, a rival family's daughter who had disappeared 8 years ago during a bloody territorial war. The Rossettis had blamed Marco's family for the kidnapping, but Marco had sworn on his mother's grave that they had nothing to do with it. Because they hadn't taken her. Someone else had. Someone who then placed her in Marco's life as Sophia. "Tell me everything she said," Marco demanded, his voice cracking, every single word. Danny took a shaky breath. "She said she remembers being in a car for a long time. A man with gray hair kept telling her to forget her old family, that they didn't want her anymore. He said her new daddy would love her more than anyone ever could." Gray hair. Marco's mind flashed to his former right-hand man, Vincent Torino, the man who had brought Sophia to him all those years ago, claiming she was an orphan from a family massacre. The man who had convinced Marco that raising the child would be an act of mercy. The same man who had access to Marco's schedule, his security details, his daughter's routine. She's scared, Danny continued. Really scared. She said the gray-haired man visits sometimes, and every time he does, she forgets things. Like pieces of her memory just disappear. Marco's blood ran cold. Vincent still visited Sophia regularly, always bringing her gifts, always spending time alone with her. Marco had thought it was kindness, an old man's affection for the child he'd helped save. But now, the pattern became horrifyingly clear. Someone was controlling Sophia's memories. Someone was keeping her confused about her identity while using her as leverage against Marco. And that someone had been in his inner circle for 8 years. "Where is she right now?" Marco asked, his voice deadly quiet. Danny hesitated. "She made me promise not to tell until she figured out what was real and what wasn't. She said if the wrong person found her, she might forget everything forever." The boy reached into his backpack and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "She drew this," he said, handing it to Marco. "She said it might help someone understand." Marco unfolded the paper with trembling fingers. The drawing was crude, done in a child's hand, but the details were unmistakable. A man with gray hair standing over a small bed, a needle in his hand. A little girl with tears streaming down her face. At the bottom of the page, written in shaky letters, were the words, "He makes me forget." Marco's vision blurred with rage. Vincent hadn't just stolen Isabella Rossetti. He had been systematically erasing her memories, keeping her trapped between two identities, using her as an unknowing pawn in whatever game he was playing. The mafia boss stood slowly, the drawing clutched in his fist. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found Vincent's number. His finger hovered over the call button. "Don't," Danny said suddenly. "She said if you contact anyone from your organization, he'll know. She said he has eyes everywhere." Marco lowered the phone. The kid was right. If Vincent had been manipulating Sophia's memories for 8 years, he would have contingency plans. The moment Marco made a move, Sophia could disappear forever, or worse. Her mind could be wiped completely clean. "How long has she been staying with you?" Marco asked. 2 nights, Danny replied. "But she's getting weaker. She says the headaches are getting worse and sometimes she can't remember my name. She's afraid that if she stays away too long, she'll forget who she really is." Marco felt his heart breaking. His daughter, the little girl he'd loved and protected for 8 years, was fighting to hold on to fragments of a stolen identity while the man responsible walked freely in Marco's own house. But there was something else. Something that made Marco's blood burn with a different kind of fury. If Sophia was really Isabella Rossetti, then the war between the families had been built on a lie. Vincent had orchestrated everything, letting 2 powerful organizations tear each other apart while he pulled the strings from the shadows. How many people had died because of Vincent's deception? How many lives had been destroyed while he played puppet master with a stolen child's memories? "Take me to her," Marco said, his voice carrying the weight of 8 years of betrayal. Danny shook his head. "She said she'll only come out when she's ready. When she's sure about what's real, then what does she want me to do?" The boy reached into his backpack again and pulled out a small object wrapped in tissue paper. "She said to give you this. She said you'd understand what it means." Marco unwrapped the tissue with shaking hands. Inside was a small silver locket, tarnished with age. He'd never seen it before, but when he opened it, his knees nearly buckled. On one side was a photo of a woman with dark hair and kind eyes. On the other side, engraved in elegant script, were the words, "To my Isabella, forever and always, Mama." This belonged to Maria Rossetti, Isabella's mother. Sophia had somehow kept this hidden from Vincent for 8 years. Despite all the memory manipulation, despite all the confusion, some part of her had held on to this one precious link to her real identity. "She remembers more than he thinks," Danny said quietly. "The memories come back in pieces when she's sleeping. That's why she's been having nightmares." Marco closed the locket and slipped it into his pocket. His daughter was fighting a war inside her own mind. and she was winning. Slowly, painfully, but winning. But time was running out. Vincent would notice her absence soon, and when he did, he would come looking. And Marco knew that when Vincent found Sophia again, he wouldn't just erase her memories, he would erase her completely. The weight of Vincent's betrayal settled on Marco's shoulders like a lead blanket. 8 years of lies. 8 years of loving a child who had been stolen, manipulated, turned into a weapon he never knew existed. But beneath the rage burning in his chest, something else flickered to life. Hope. Sophia was fighting back. Despite everything Vincent had done to her mind, she was clawing her way back to the truth. "I need to see her," Marco said, his voice hoarse with desperation. Danny shook his head firmly. She said not yet. She said she needs to remember more first, or else she might get confused again and forget everything. The boy pulled out a crumpled notebook from his backpack, pages yellowed and torn at the edges. "She's been writing things down, every memory that comes back. She said writing them down makes them harder for the gray-haired man to steal." Marco's hands shook as he took the notebook. The handwriting was shaky, desperate, like someone racing against time. Page after page of fragments, snippets of a life stolen and buried. "I remember a garden with red flowers. Mama used to sing while she watered them. The gray-haired man gave me a shot yesterday. I forgot Mama's face for 3 hours. My real name starts with I. Isabella? Irene? I can't remember. There was a dog, a big brown dog that slept on my bed. What happened to him?" Marco read each line, his heart breaking with every word. This was his daughter's mind fighting for survival, holding on to pieces of herself that someone else was trying to destroy. "She's getting stronger," Danny said quietly. Yesterday she remembered more than she forgot. She said that's never happened before. "How?" Marco asked, though he was afraid to hope. Danny smiled for the first time since their conversation began. "I think it's because she's away from him. Every day she doesn't see the gray-haired man, more memories come back. It's like her brain is healing itself." But Marco knew Vincent wouldn't stay away forever. The man was too careful, too controlling. He would notice Sophia's absence soon, and when he did, he would tear the city apart looking for her, just like Marco had been doing. The irony wasn't lost on him. Vincent had probably been watching Marco's desperate search with amusement, knowing exactly where Sophia was the entire time. "There's something else," Danny said, interrupting Marco's thoughts. "She asked me to give you a message if I found you." "What message?" The boy took a deep breath. "She said to tell you that she knows you love her, the real her, not just the person they made her pretend to be. She said she can feel it, even when everything else is confusing." Marco's vision blurred. Even with her memories fractured, even with her identity stolen, Sophia had somehow held on to the love between them. It was the one thing Vincent couldn't touch, couldn't manipulate, couldn't steal. But she also said something else, Danny continued, his voice growing smaller. "She said she's scared that when she remembers everything, you won't love her anymore, because she'll be someone different than the daughter you thought you had." The words hit Marco like a physical blow. His little girl was afraid that discovering her true identity would cost her the only father she'd ever known. She was choosing between her real past and her stolen present, and either choice meant losing something precious. "Tell her," Marco said, his voice breaking, "that I don't care what her name used to be. I don't care who she was before. She's my daughter, and nothing will ever change that." Danny nodded solemnly. "I'll tell her. But she's running out of time. She said the headaches are getting worse, and sometimes she can't tell the difference between dreams and memories." Marco felt panic rising in his throat. If Sophia's mind was deteriorating under the strain of fighting Vincent's conditioning, she could lose herself completely. Not to Vincent's manipulation, but to the battle itself. "There has to be something we can do," Marco said desperately. Danny hesitated, then reached into his backpack one more time. "She gave me this too," he said, pulling out a small tape recorder, the kind they used in schools. She said she's been recording herself at night, when the memories are strongest. She said if something happens to her, someone should know the truth. Marco took the recorder with trembling hands and pressed play. Sophia's voice filled the alley, quiet and scared but determined. "My name is Isabella Rossetti," she said into the darkness. "I was taken when I was 3 years old. My mama had dark hair and sang in Italian. My papa had a scar on his chin and smelled like coffee. Vincent Torino stole me from them and gave me to Marco Venturi. But Marco didn't know. Marco thinks I'm his daughter, and I love him like he's my real papa. But I need to remember who I really am before they make me forget forever." The recording continued, Sophia's voice growing stronger as she spoke. She talked about fragments of memories, about the injections Vincent gave her, about the fear that lived in her chest every time he visited. But she also talked about Marco, about feeling safe in his arms, about the bedtime stories he told her. "I don't want to lose either family," she whispered into the recorder, "but I think I have to choose, and I think the choice is going to hurt everyone I love." Marco stopped the recording, unable to listen anymore. His daughter was carrying a burden no child should ever bear, caught between two identities, two families, two versions of love. But as he stood in that dark alley, holding the evidence of 8 years of deception, Marco realized something that Vincent had never counted on. The mafia boss wasn't just fighting to get his daughter back anymore. He was fighting to give Isabella Rossetti the choice to decide who she wanted to be. And if that meant helping her remember a family he'd never known, if it meant potentially losing the child who had given his life meaning, then that's what love really looked like. The war between the families had been built on Vincent's lie, but it was going to end with the truth, no matter what that truth cost Marco personally. "Where is she hiding?" he asked Danny. The boy looked uncertain. "She made me promise to wait until she was ready." But Marco could see the conflict in the child's eyes. Danny cared about Sophia, maybe even loved her, in the way children love the broken things they try to protect. He was torn between keeping his promise and knowing that Sophia was running out of time. "Tell her I'll wait," Marco said finally. "Tell her I'll wait as long as she needs, but also tell her that Vincent won't wait forever. And when he comes looking, I want to be there to protect her." Danny nodded and turned to leave, then stopped. "Mister," he said without turning around, "what if she chooses to be Isabella instead of Sophia?" Marco felt his heart crack, but his voice remained steady. "Then I'll help her find her real family, and I'll love her enough to let her go." The boy disappeared into the shadows, leaving Marco alone with the weight of his decision. He looked down at the tape recorder in his hand, at the notebook full of stolen memories, at the locket that belonged to a woman he'd never met. Vincent had played a long game, but he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated the power of love to survive even the most sophisticated manipulation. And now, Marco was going to show him exactly what that mistake would cost. Marco stood in the darkness, clutching the evidence of Vincent's betrayal, when his phone buzzed, a text message from an unknown number. His blood turned to ice as he read the words. "Looking for something, old friend? Come home. We need to talk. Vincent." The message was followed by a photo that made Marco's knees buckle. Sophia sitting in what looked like a medical chair, her eyes vacant and unfocused, wires attached to her temples, Vincent's face visible in the background, holding what appeared to be some kind of device. Marco's hands shook as he typed back, "If you hurt her, I'll kill you with my bare hands." The response came instantly. "Hurt her? Marco, I've been taking care of our little problem for 8 years, but it seems she's been having some memory issues lately. Nothing a small procedure can't fix." Danny appeared at Marco's side, having heard the phone buzz. "What is it?" the boy asked, his face pale in the streetlight. Marco showed him the photo. Danny's gasp echoed through the empty alley. "He found her," the boy whispered. "But how?" Marco's mind raced. Vincent was too smart to have left this to chance. He must have been tracking Sophia somehow. A chip, a tracker, something that would lead him right to her no matter where she hid. "Danny," Marco said, his voice deadly calm. I need you to listen to me very carefully. Vincent isn't just erasing Sophia's memories anymore. He's going to destroy her mind completely. The boy's eyes filled with tears. But she was getting better. She remembered more today than ever before. That's exactly why he's panicking, Marco realized. She's breaking free from his control, and he can't let that happen. If she remembers everything, she can expose him. Another text arrived. You have 1 hour to come alone, or the girl forgets everything forever, including you. Marco stared at the message, his heart pounding. This was Vincent's endgame. Lure Marco to a location where he controlled everything, then eliminate both problems at once. Sophia would lose her memories permanently, and Marco would disappear. But there was something Vincent didn't know, something that could change everything. Marco pulled out the locket Sophia had kept hidden for 8 years. Inside, beneath Maria Rossetti's photo, was something he'd missed before. A tiny piece of paper, folded so small it was almost invisible. With trembling fingers, he unfolded it. Written in a child's handwriting were numbers, an address. Danny, Marco said, his voice tight with urgency. This address? Do you recognize it? The boy squinted at the paper. That's the old warehouse district. But mister, that's where all the abandoned buildings are. Nobody goes there. Marco's blood ran cold. Vincent had been using an abandoned warehouse as his base of operations, a place where screams wouldn't be heard, where medical equipment could be set up without questions, where a child's mind could be systematically destroyed. How long would it take to get there? Marco asked. Maybe 20 minutes if you drive fast, Danny replied. But mister, it's a trap. You know it's a trap. Marco nodded grimly. Of course it's a trap. But Vincent made one mistake. He thinks he's the only one who's been planning. The mafia boss pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in years. The voice that answered was gruff, suspicious. Who is this? Antonio Rossetti, Marco said. This is Marco Venturi. We need to talk. The silence on the other end stretched for what felt like eternity. Antonio Rossetti was the head of the rival family, the man who had been Marco's enemy for 8 years, the father of the child Marco had unknowingly raised. You've got some nerve calling me, Venturi. Antonio's voice was filled with barely controlled rage. After what you did to my family. Listen to me, Marco said urgently. Your daughter is alive. Isabella is alive, and she's in danger. Another silence. When Antonio spoke again, his voice was different, shaking. What did you say? Vincent Torino has been holding her for 8 years. He's been erasing her memories, keeping her confused about who she is. He made me believe she was an orphan, made you believe I had taken her. You're lying, Antonio whispered, but there was hope in his voice. Desperate, painful hope. She has Maria's locket, Marco said. She remembers the garden with red flowers. She remembers your scar, the way you smelled like coffee. He heard Antonio's sharp intake of breath. Those were details only Isabella would know. Details Vincent could never have told Marco. Where is she? Antonio demanded. Marco closed his eyes. This was the hardest thing he'd ever had to do. Vincent has her. He's going to destroy her mind completely in less than an hour. But Antonio, I need you to know something else. What? I love her too. For 8 years, I've loved her as my own daughter. And if we're going to save her, we have to work together. The phone went quiet except for the sound of Antonio's ragged breathing. 2 fathers, 2 men who had been enemies, both fighting for the same child. Tell me what you need, Antonio said finally. Marco felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Vincent thinks I'm coming alone. He's not expecting the Rossetti family to show up with me. Where? Marco gave him the warehouse address. Antonio, there's something else. When we get Isabella back, she's going to have to choose between the father who raised her and the father she was stolen from. And I want you to know that whatever she chooses, I'll respect it. Marco. Antonio's voice was thick with emotion. Thank you for loving her when I couldn't. As Marco hung up the phone, Danny tugged at his sleeve. Mister, what about me? I want to help too. Marco knelt down and put his hands on the boy's shoulders. Danny, You've already done more than you know. You saved her life by bringing us together. But this is too dangerous. She's my friend, Danny said stubbornly. She trusted me when she was scared. I can't just let you go without me. Marco saw something in the boy's eyes that reminded him of himself at that age. Fierce loyalty, unshakable determination. Okay, he said, but you stay in the car. No matter what happens, you stay safe. As they walked toward Marco's car, Danny asked quietly, "What if she doesn't remember either of you when this is over?" Marco's heart clenched. It was possible that Vincent's final procedure would wipe Sophia's mind clean, leaving her with no memories of anyone who had loved her. "Then we'll help her make new memories," Marco said. "All of us together." The drive to the warehouse felt like the longest 20 minutes of Marco's life. Behind them, 3 black cars followed at a distance. The Rossetti family, coming to reclaim their daughter, coming to end a war that should never have started. Marco's phone buzzed. Again. Another message from Vincent. 10 minutes, Marco. Come alone, or she becomes a blank slate forever." Marco typed back quickly. "I'm coming." But as the warehouse came into view, its broken windows like dead eyes staring into the night, Marco knew this wasn't just about saving Sophia anymore. This was about exposing Vincent's web of lies, about giving 2 families closure, about letting a stolen child finally choose her own destiny. Vincent thought he held all the cards, but he was about to discover that love, real love, was stronger than any manipulation he could devise. The war was about to end, not with bullets or blood, but with the truth that a brave little girl had fought so hard to remember. Marco parked the car and looked back at Danny. "Whatever happens in there, you remember this. Sophia fought for 8 years to hold on to pieces of herself. Tonight, we fight for her." As he walked toward the warehouse, Marco could hear the other cars pulling up behind him. 2 fathers, united by their love for one child, ready to face whatever Vincent had waiting for them in the darkness ahead. The final confrontation was about to begin. Confrontation was about to begin. The warehouse loomed ahead like a tomb, its broken windows reflecting the city lights in jagged fragments. Marco's footsteps echoed on the cracked pavement as he approached the entrance, each step bringing him closer to a confrontation 8 years in the making. Behind him, he could hear car doors closing softly. Antonio Rossetti and his men, positioning themselves around the building's perimeter. 2 enemy families, working together for the first time in their bloody history. Marco's phone vibrated. A final message from Vincent. "Doors open, 2nd floor. Come up slowly and keep your hands where I can see them." The warehouse entrance gaped like a mouth, darkness swallowing the threshold. Marco stepped inside, his eyes adjusting to the dim light filtering through the broken ceiling. The smell hit him immediately. Antiseptic, medical equipment, fear. His heart pounded as he climbed the rusted stairs, each creak announcing his presence. On the 2nd floor, fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting sickly shadows across what had once been an office space. And there, in the center of the room, was Sophia. She sat in a medical chair that looked like something from a nightmare. Wires snaked from her temples to a machine that blinked with cold, electronic precision. Her eyes were half closed, unfocused, like she was floating in some drugged twilight. Vincent stood behind the chair, his gray hair perfectly styled, his smile as warm as winter. "Marco, my old friend, you're just in time for the grand finale." "Let her go," Marco said, his voice steady despite the rage burning in his chest. "Your fight is with me." Vincent chuckled, his hand resting on Sophia's shoulder with mock tenderness. "Fight? Oh, Marco, there's no fight here. This is simply housekeeping, tying up loose ends that should have been handled years ago." Sophia's head turned slightly at the sound of Marco's voice. Her lips moved, forming words too quiet to hear. "What did you give her?" Marco demanded, taking a step forward. "Nothing permanent," Vincent replied, adjusting a dial on the machine. "Just something to keep her calm while we finish our work. You see, the little princess has been having some very inconvenient memories lately." The machine beeped, and Sophia's body tensed. A small cry escaped her lips. "Stop it," Marco growled, his hands clenching into fists. "I'm afraid I can't do that," Vincent said, his voice taking on a lecturing tone. "You see, Marco, this child has become a liability. She remembers things that could destroy everything we've built. Names, faces, conversations that happened when she was supposedly too young to understand." Vincent walked around the chair, his fingers trailing along the equipment, like a pianist preparing for a concert. "Did you know she remembers the night I took her? Every detail. The way her mother screamed. The way her father begged. She even remembers what I told them before I pulled the trigger." Marco's vision blurred with rage. "You killed them." "Of course I killed them," Vincent said matter-of-factly. "The Rossettis needed to disappear, and you needed a daughter to soften your image. 2 problems. 1 solution." The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Vincent hadn't just stolen a child. He had orchestrated a massacre, then placed the survivor in Marco's home like a living trophy. "But children grow up," Vincent continued, his hand hovering over another control, "and sometimes they remember things they shouldn't. So tonight, we're going to give little Sophia a fresh start, a completely clean slate." "You mean you're going to destroy her mind?" Marco said. Vincent shrugged. "Potato, potato. The point is, after tonight, she won't remember being Isabella Rossetti. She won't remember being Sophia Venturi either. She'll be whoever I tell her to be." Sophia's eyes suddenly snapped open, focused and alert. She looked directly at Marco, her voice cutting through the warehouse air like a blade. "Papa," she whispered, and the word carried 8 years of love and trust. "I remembered everything." Vincent spun toward her, his face twisting with alarm. "Impossible. The sedative should have kept you under for hours." Sophia's smile was weak but triumphant. "I stopped taking your medicine 3 weeks ago. I've been pretending to forget so you wouldn't suspect." Vincent's face went pale as the sound of footsteps echoed through the warehouse. Antonio Rossetti appeared in the doorway, flanked by his men, their weapons drawn. The 2 families that had been at war for 8 years now stood united in that moment. "Hello, Vincent," Antonio said, his voice carrying the weight of a father's 8-year nightmare. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." Vincent's hand moved toward a switch on the machine, but Marco was faster. He lunged forward, tackling the gray-haired man to the ground as gunshots rang out. In the chaos that followed, Sophia pulled the wires from her temples, her mind finally free from the machine that had held her prisoner. When the smoke cleared, Vincent lay motionless on the warehouse floor. Sophia stood between 2 fathers, her memories intact, her choice finally her own. She looked at Marco, then at Antonio, tears streaming down her face. "I remember everything now," she whispered. "I remember both families, both fathers who loved me." And in that moment, as sirens wailed in the distance and justice finally arrived, Isabella Sofia Venturi Rossetti made a choice that would heal 2 broken families and end a war built on one man's lies. Sometimes the truth doesn't set you free. Sometimes it gives you the power to choose who you want to be.